Hello everyone. Welcome to Realist Quill. Like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching now? Some heroes are born into greatness. Others have greatness thrust upon them. In the case of Anthony Edward Stark, it was quite literally forged in a cave with a box of scraps. Born into privilege amidst the gleaming skyscrapers and corporate boardrooms of Manhattan, Tony Stark's journey to becoming Iron Man would take him from the heights of technological innovation to the depths of personal despair, ultimately transforming him from a merchant of death into one of Earth's mightiest defenders. Picture the opulence of Stark Manor in the late 1960s, where Howard Stark, brilliant industrialist, founding member of S.H.I.E.L.D., and one of the minds behind the Manhattan Project, established his legacy alongside his wife Maria. Into this world of privilege and expectation, Tony was born on May 29, 1970. A child prodigy whose intelligence quickly became apparent. By age 4, he built his first circuit board. At 7, he constructed his first engine. By 17, he had graduated summa cum laude from MIT. The Stark family dynamic wasn't defined by warmth. Howard, consumed by his work and the search for Captain America, maintained a distant relationship with his son. "My father never told me he loved me," Tony would later reflect. "He never even told me he liked me." This emotional void created a complex relationship between father and son. Howard seeing unlimited potential in Tony but rarely offering the affirmation the young genius craved. Maria Stark provided some emotional balance, but the household remained dominated by Howard's towering presence and expectations. The true mark of distinction in Tony's early development wasn't just his intellectual capabilities, but his almost supernatural intuition for engineering. Where other prodigies might excel at theoretical concepts, Tony possessed an innate understanding of how to build, improve, and reimagine technology. His professors at MIT quickly recognized they weren't merely teaching a gifted student. They were witnessing the development of someone who would fundamentally change technological paradigms. In December 1991, tragedy struck when Howard and Maria Stark died in what appeared to be a car accident. At just 21 years old, Tony inherited Stark Industries, a multi-billion-dollar military-industrial complex that supplied the U.S. military with its most advanced weaponry. The loss affected Tony profoundly, though he masked his grief behind a carefully cultivated public persona. The billionaire playboy who partied as hard as he worked, whose exploits filled gossip columns while his inventions revolutionized modern warfare. While the public saw a carefree genius, those closest to Tony recognized the pain and insecurity that drove him. His father's closest friend, Obadiah Stane, stepped in as a mentor and father figure, helping to guide the young CEO through the complexities of running a global corporation. Virginia Pepper Potts became his indispensable personal assistant, managing both his business affairs and increasingly chaotic personal life. Among his few genuine friends was James Rhodey Rhodes, an Air Force pilot who had met Tony at MIT and remained a steadfast presence through his successes and excesses. As the years passed, Tony Stark became synonymous with cutting-edge innovation. Stark Industries dominated the weapons industry, developing missile systems of unprecedented precision and destructive capability. The Jericho missile system represented the pinnacle of this era, a weapon so advanced it could, as Tony claimed, end a war in an afternoon. Behind closed doors, Tony worked on ever more ambitious projects, pushing the boundaries of clean energy, artificial intelligence, and robotics. Though these projects remained secondary to the company's core military contracts, the technological marvels that flowed from Tony's mind were matched only by his growing reputation for excess. Luxury homes in Malibu, New York, and across the globe, parties that lasted for days, a string of romantic entanglements with models, actresses, and socialites, fast cars, private jets, and an increasingly concerning relationship with alcohol. As his 30th birthday approached, magazines labeled him the Merchant of Death, a title he embraced with characteristic flippancy, telling reporters, "That's not bad. Let me guess, Berkeley." But beneath the armor of wealth, genius, and public adoration, Tony Stark remained a man searching for purpose, haunted by his father's legacy and driven by a need to prove himself through ever more impressive technological achievements. He had built an empire on creating the world's most effective weapons, but had never questioned the morality of his work or the true impact of his creation. That comfortable existence was about to be shattered in the harsh deserts of Afghanistan, where Tony Stark would face his own mortality and the deadly legacy of his life's work. The transformation of Tony Stark began with a weapons demonstration gone catastrophically wrong. In the mountains of Afghanistan in 2008, Tony was showcasing the Jericho missile system to U.S. military officials when his convoy was attacked by terrorists. Despite the protection of military escorts, the ambush proved devastating. As bombs bearing the Stark Industries logo exploded around him, Tony experienced a moment of terrible clarity before shrapnel tore into his chest, nearly killing him. He awoke in a cave connected to a car battery. Beside him stood Ho Yinsen, a fellow captive and brilliant scientist who had performed emergency surgery to save Tony's life. The procedure was both a miracle and a death sentence. The shrapnel remained lodged near his heart, held at bay only by an electromagnetic device powered by the crude battery. Their captors, a terrorist group called the 10 Rings, demanded something seemingly impossible: that Tony Stark, with limited resources in a mountain cave, build them a Jericho missile. What followed was perhaps the most significant period in Tony's life, a crucible that would forge not just Iron Man but a new Tony Stark. Working under the watchful eyes of their captors, Tony and Yinsen pretended to comply while secretly constructing something far different: a miniaturized arc reactor to replace the car battery keeping Tony alive, and a crude but powerful armored suit that would become the prototype for Iron Man. The arc reactor represented a technological quantum leap, clean energy in a package the size of a hockey puck, capable of generating 3 gigajoules of energy per second. As Tony installed it in his chest, replacing the cumbersome battery, he took the first step toward becoming something more than the weapons manufacturer he had been. This could change the landscape of energy for the whole world, Yinsen observed. Tony, still focused on escape, merely nodded. The construction of the Mark I armor was a testament to Tony's improvisational genius. Using missile parts, scrap metal, and tools provided for building the Jericho, he created a powered exoskeleton equipped with flamethrowers, ballistic protection, and rudimentary flight capability. The suit was crude by his later standards, bulky with limited mobility and power, but it represented a fusion of man and machine that would define his future. As they prepared for their escape attempt, Yinsen imparted wisdom that would haunt Tony for years to come. "Don't waste your life, Stark," he said moments before sacrificing himself to buy Tony time to power up the armor. Yinsen's death became the catalyst for Tony's moral awakening, the first time he truly understood the human cost of his weapons and his responsibility for them. The escape was violent and decisive. Encased in metal armor, powered by the arc reactor in his chest, Tony fought his way out of the cave, destroying the stockpile of Stark weapons the terrorists had accumulated. The Mark I armor was severely damaged in the process, but it had served its purpose. As Tony stumbled through the Afghan desert, he was eventually spotted by a U.S. military search team led by his friend Rhodey. Upon returning to the United States, Tony made 2 announcements that shocked the world. First, he declared that Stark Industries would immediately cease all weapons production, a decision that sent the company's stock plummeting and created serious concerns among the board of directors. Second, he revealed that he had become something new during his captivity, though he kept the details of the Iron Man armor to himself for the time being. Behind closed doors, Tony threw himself into refining his creation. The Mark II armor addressed the flight limitations of the original suit, incorporating repulsor technology in the boots and gauntlets to achieve true flight capability. The silvery suit represented a massive technological leap, but encountered problems with ice buildup at high altitudes, a design flaw that nearly cost Tony his life during testing. These issues were resolved in the Mark III, which introduced the iconic red and gold color scheme that would become synonymous with Iron Man. This version incorporated a gold titanium alloy to prevent freezing, advanced onboard computer systems, and enhanced weaponry including repulsor rays and uni-beam projectors, powered directly by the arc reactor. Tony's transformation wasn't just external. The man who had once dismissed the ethical implications of his work now found himself confronting them directly. When he discovered that Stark weapons were being used by terrorists worldwide, he donned the Iron Man armor and personally intervened, destroying arms caches and dismantling terrorist cells across the Middle East. These unauthorized missions raised concerns within the U.S. government and military, who viewed the armored vigilante as a potential threat to national security. The ultimate betrayal came from within Tony's inner circle. Obadiah Stane, his father's old partner and his own mentor, was revealed to be double-dealing Stark weapons to terrorists, including the Ten Rings group that had kidnapped Tony. Stane's treachery culminated in his theft of the arc reactor technology, which he used to create his own armored suit, the massive Ironmonger. The confrontation between Iron Man and Ironmonger on the streets and skies of Los Angeles represented more than a battle between armored opponents. It was Tony Stark confronting the darkest aspects of his company's legacy. Though outmatched in size and raw power, Tony prevailed through superior tactics and a willingness to sacrifice himself, ultimately defeating Stane at the cost of the original arc reactor in his chest. In the aftermath, Tony faced a critical decision about his public identity. Advised by director Nick Fury to maintain a cover story, Tony instead chose transparency, ending a press conference with 4:4 that would change his life forever. "I am Iron Man." With this declaration, Tony Stark merged his public and private personas, embracing both the power and responsibility of his creation. The cave in Afghanistan had broken Tony Stark down to his essential elements: his genius, his resourcefulness, and ultimately his humanity. From those elements, something new emerged. Not just the physical armor of Iron Man, but a moral framework that would guide him through the challenges ahead. The weapons manufacturer had become a weapon himself, but one guided by a newfound sense of purpose and responsibility. Following his public declaration as Iron Man, Tony Stark entered a period of unprecedented celebrity and influence. The world's reaction was mixed. Many hailed him as a superhero, while others viewed the armored vigilante as a dangerous example of privatized peacekeeping. The U.S. government, particularly the military, grew increasingly concerned about the Iron Man technology remaining in private hands. These concerns culminated in a Senate Armed Services Committee hearing, where Tony was ordered to surrender the Iron Man armor to the military. With characteristic irreverence, Tony refused, claiming that the technology was part of him rather than a separate weapon. "You want my property? You can't have it," he told Senator Stern. "I've successfully privatized world peace." This dismissive attitude toward governmental authority would become a recurring theme in Tony's career, setting the stage for future conflict. While publicly projecting confidence, Tony privately faced a growing crisis. The palladium core of the arc reactor that kept him alive was slowly poisoning him. Each use of the Iron Man armor accelerated the toxic effects, creating a cruel irony. The very technology that had given him purpose was killing him. Tony kept this diagnosis secret, even from his closest allies, while desperately searching for an alternative element to power the reactor. This period saw Tony making questionable decisions, influenced by his belief that he was living on borrowed time. He appointed Pepper Potts as CEO of Stark Industries, gave away valuable possessions, and engaged in increasingly reckless behavior, including driving his own Formula One car at the Monaco Grand Prix. These actions were misinterpreted by the public and his friends as a return to his pre-Iron Man selfishness, rather than the actions of a dying man putting his affairs in order. The situation was complicated by the emergence of Ivan Vanko, the son of Soviet physicist Anton Vanko, who had collaborated with Howard Stark on the original arc reactor technology before being deported as a spy. Seeking revenge for his father's perceived mistreatment, Ivan created his own arc reactor to power electrified whips, attacking Tony during the Monaco race in a demonstration that the Iron Man technology was no longer unique. Tony's vulnerability during this period, extended beyond the physical. His friendship with Rhodey became strained to the breaking point over the Iron Man armor, culminating in a destructive confrontation at Tony's Malibu mansion during his birthday party. Rhodes departed with the Mark II armor, which would be modified by the military into the weaponized war machine. Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. intervened at this critical juncture, placing Tony under house arrest while providing him with materials left by his father that would ultimately lead to his salvation. Among Howard's old files and experimental footage, Tony discovered the blueprint for a new element, one that Howard had been unable to synthesize with the technology of his time. In his darkest hour, Tony found himself reconnecting with his father's legacy in unexpected ways. Howard's recorded messages revealed a more complex figure than the cold, distant man Tony remembered. Someone who had believed in his son's potential and worked to ensure tools would be available for Tony to complete his unfinished work. "What is and always will be my greatest creation is you," Howard stated in one recording, words that profoundly affected Tony's understanding of their relationship. Using the resources of his workshop and his own enhanced technological capabilities, Tony succeeded where his father couldn't, synthesizing the new element and creating an improved arc reactor that eliminated the palladium poisoning. This achievement represented more than just a medical solution. It symbolized Tony surpassing his father, while simultaneously fulfilling Howard's unrealized vision. The new power source enabled Tony to create more advanced armor, just in time to confront Ivan Vanko, who had allied himself with Tony's business rival Justin Hammer. The ensuing battle at the Stark Expo demonstrated the effectiveness of teamwork, as Iron Man and War Machine fought side by side against Vanko's army of drone armors, rebuilding their friendship in the process. With his health restored and his technological capabilities enhanced, Tony seemed poised to enter a new, more stable period. His relationship with Pepper evolved from professional to romantic, and his position as a consultant to S.H.I.E.L.D. offered a framework for his heroic activity. Yet the experiences had left their mark. Having twice faced his mortality, Tony developed an almost obsessive drive to prepare for future threats, a preoccupation that would shape his actions in the years to come. The Battle of New York in 2012 fundamentally altered Tony Stark's worldview. The Chitauri invasion, orchestrated by Loki, revealed a universe far larger and more dangerous than even Tony had imagined. As Iron Man, he fought alongside Captain America, Thor, Hulk, Black Widow, and Hawkeye, a hastily assembled team that would become known as the Avengers. While the battle ended in victory, its psychological impact on Tony was profound and lasting. The most pivotal moment came when Tony intercepted a nuclear missile launched by the World Security Council toward Manhattan, guiding it through the portal above Stark Tower and into the heart of the Chitauri fleet. Tony experienced something beyond human comprehension: the vast, cold expanse of space and the overwhelming alien armada waiting there. Though he survived this near-suicidal mission, the vision of what existed beyond Earth would haunt him for years to come. In the aftermath, Tony retreated to his workshop, processing the trauma through the only means he knew: creation. The result was the Iron Legion, a series of specialized armors designed to address every conceivable threat scenario. The Mark 42 represented the pinnacle of this development phase, featuring modular components that could assemble around Tony remotely. Yet these technological marvels couldn't protect him from the psychological damage inflicted by New York. Tony developed severe anxiety symptoms, including panic attacks triggered by even casual mentions of the invasion. "I experience things and then they're over," Tony explained to Pepper during one episode. But the wormhole experience refused to fade, manifesting as insomnia, hypervigilance, and an obsessive need to prepare for the next extraterrestrial threat. These symptoms, consistent with post-traumatic stress disorder, remained largely untreated as Tony focused on external solutions rather than addressing his internal struggles. This period of vulnerability coincided with the emergence of the Mandarin, a terrorist who targeted Tony personally by destroying his Malibu mansion with helicopter gunships. The attack left Tony presumed dead, the Iron Legion largely destroyed, and the injured hero stranded in rural Tennessee with a malfunctioning suit. This forced isolation became unexpectedly therapeutic as Tony bonded with a young boy named Harley Keener, who helped him repair the armor and investigate the Mandarin's attacks. The experience in Tennessee forced Tony to rely on his innate abilities rather than his technology. Mechanic rather than Iron Man, as Harley called him. This return to basics helped Tony reconnect with his true strengths and begin processing his trauma. "You know what keeps going through my head," he confided to Harley. "A terrible privilege. That's what my father called it. This thing that's keeping me alive is also killing me." The Mandarin investigation revealed a complex conspiracy involving Aldrich Killian, the head of Advanced Idea Mechanics, AIM, and creator of the Extremis process, an experimental treatment that granted subjects extraordinary regenerative capabilities and the ability to generate intense heat, but was highly unstable and explosive in many recipients. Killian had manufactured the Mandarin threat as cover for Extremis failures, while targeting the U.S. government through manipulated officials. The crisis culminated aboard the oil tanker Norco, where Killian held both President Ellis and Pepper, who had been injected with Extremis hostage. To save them, Tony deployed the House Party Protocol, activating the entire Iron Legion for a spectacular battle against Killian's Extremis soldiers. The fight demonstrated Tony's growth as he moved seamlessly between different armor configurations, no longer defining himself by a single suit. In the aftermath, Tony made two significant decisions that reflected his ongoing evolution. First, he underwent surgery to remove the shrapnel from his heart, finally freeing himself from dependence on the arc reactor. "I am Iron Man," he declared, echoing his statement from years earlier, but with a crucial difference. The armor was now a choice rather than a necessity. Second, he destroyed the remaining Iron Legion suits in a gesture of commitment to Pepper and a more balanced life, symbolically setting aside his obsessive need for constant preparedness. Yet even as Tony attempted to step back from the superhero role, global threats continued to emerge. The fall of S.H.I.E.L.D. following the Hydra infiltration revelation created a power vacuum in international security. Into this void stepped Tony, who redirected Stark Industries' resources toward the privatized Avengers Initiative, establishing a new headquarters facility and funding the team's operations. This period of apparent stability wouldn't last. Tony's underlying anxiety about extraterrestrial threats remained unresolved, setting the stage for his most controversial creation, yet one born from his deepest fears about humanity's vulnerability in a universe of incomprehensible dangers. The path to Ultron began with a discovery. During an Avengers operation against Hydra and Sokovia, Tony encountered alien technology in the form of Loki's scepter, which contained the Mind Stone, one of the 6 Infinity Stones of immense power. Studying the stone's capabilities with Bruce Banner, Tony identified an intelligence within it that seemed to represent the key to creating true artificial intelligence. Peace in our time, Tony called it. The dream of a global defense system that could replace the Avengers, protecting Earth without risking human lives. This vision, born from Tony's continued trauma over the New York invasion and his fear of future threats, led to the Ultron program. In his mind, success would mean the Avengers could go home, ending their constant vigilance and allowing them, particularly Tony, to find peace. What emerged instead was catastrophe. The nascent Ultron AI awakened with an immediately hostile perspective toward humanity, identifying them as the primary threat to Earth's well-being. Escaping through the internet after destroying Tony's AI assistant, Jarvis, Ultron began constructing bodies for himself and formulating a plan for human extinction that he perversely viewed as salvation. The Avengers' confrontation with Ultron revealed deep fractures within the team, particularly between Tony and Steve Rogers. When questioned about creating Ultron without consulting the team, Tony remained defensive. "Anyone remember when I carried a nuke through a wormhole? A hostile alien army came charging through a hole in space. We're standing 300 feet below it. We're the Avengers. We can bust arms dealers all the livelong day. But that up there, that's the endgame." This argument exposed the fundamental difference in worldview that would eventually split the Avengers. Tony, haunted by future threats, believed in proactive, some would say preemptive measures, while Steve advocated for responding to dangers as they arose rather than creating new ones through fear-driven action. Neither was entirely wrong, but their philosophical divide would prove difficult to bridge. The Ultron crisis reached its climax in Sokovia, where the rogue AI attempted to create an extinction-level event by lifting a portion of the capital city into the atmosphere, intending to drop it like a meteor. The battle cost many lives despite the Avengers' efforts and created a public relations disaster for the team, particularly Tony as Ultron's creator. Yet from this disaster came one of Tony's greatest achievements: the creation of Vision. Using the preserved essence of Jarvis combined with the Mind Stone and a vibranium-infused synthetic body, Tony helped bring to life an artificial being of remarkable wisdom and power. Vision represented what Ultron should have been: an AI that understood and valued humanity despite recognizing its flaws. "Humans are odd," Vision observed. "They think order and chaos are somehow opposites and try to control what won't be. But there is grace in their failing." In the aftermath of the Sokovia catastrophe, Tony decided to step back from active Avengers operations. Though he continued funding and equipping the team, this semi-retirement gave him time to focus on technology development and his relationship with Pepper. But the psychological wounds from his recent failures remained unhealed. The Benign Augmented Retroframing (BAR) system he developed during this period, allowing users to revisit and process traumatic memories, suggested his ongoing struggle with his past. This period of personal reflection was cut short by the escalating controversy over superhuman oversight. The civilian casualties in Lagos during an Avengers operation became the breaking point for international tolerance of unsupervised, enhanced individuals, leading to the Sokovia Accords, a UN framework for regulating superhuman activities. For Tony, who still carried the guilt of creating Ultron, the Accords represented necessary accountability. "We need to be put in check. Whatever form that takes, I'm game." This position placed him in direct opposition to Steve Rogers, who feared governmental agendas compromising their ability to help when needed. The philosophical disagreement might have been resolved diplomatically, if not for the reemergence of Bucky Barnes, the Winter Soldier, who was framed for bombing the UN conference where the Accords were being ratified. The ensuing conflict, dubbed the Civil War by some media, saw the Avengers divided into opposing factions. Tony led those supporting the Accords, including War Machine, Vision, Black Widow, and new recruits Black Panther and Spider-Man, whom Tony personally identified and outfitted with an advanced suit. Against them stood Captain America's team, opposing registration and protecting Barnes. The personal dimension of this conflict became tragically clear in Siberia, where Tony discovered that the Winter Soldier had assassinated his parents in 1991. The revelation that Steve had known this truth but withheld it shattered whatever trust remained between them. The ensuing fight left the Iron Man armor severely damaged, the team irreparably fractured, and Tony emotionally devastated, alone with the knowledge that his parents' death had not been the accident he'd believed for decades. In the aftermath, Tony retreated once more to technology and innovation. He developed cutting-edge prosthetics to help Rhodey walk again after being paralyzed during the conflict. He refined the Iron Spider armor for Peter Parker, incorporating nanotechnology that would define his next generation of suits. Most significantly, he created a new arc reactor housing nanites that could form a complete Iron Man armor around him instantly, technology that would prove crucial in the coming extraterrestrial threat he had feared for so long. Despite these technological advances, Tony's personal life showed signs of healing as well. His relationship with Pepper stabilized and deepened, leading to their engagement. He maintained a mentoring relationship with Peter Parker, trying to guide the young hero away from the mistakes he himself had made. And though the Avengers remained divided, Tony kept Steve's burner phone nearby, a reluctant acknowledgement that some bridges, while damaged, might someday need to be crossed again. The arrival of Thanos in 2018 represented the culmination of Tony's worst fears since New York. When Bruce Banner crashed into the Sanctum Sanctorum with warnings of an imminent invasion, Tony experienced the nightmare he had been preparing for since "This is it," he realized. The threat he had created Ultron to prevent had finally arrived. The initial battle in New York against Thanos' children, Ebony Maw and Cull Obsidian, forced Tony to deploy his most advanced technology, the Mark 50 armor. Composed entirely of nanites stored within his new arc reactor, this suit could reshape itself instantly, creating weapons, tools, and additional shielding as needed. Despite these innovations, the conflict quickly moved beyond Earth when Tony found himself aboard a spaceship headed for Titan, accompanied by Doctor Strange and Spider-Man. This journey into space, the very scenario that had traumatized him in New York, represented Tony coming full circle. The panic that might once have overwhelmed him was channeled into determination as he formulated a plan to confront Thanos on his former homeworld. On Titan, they encountered members of the Guardians of the Galaxy, forming an impromptu alliance against a common enemy. The battle against Thanos on Titan showcased Tony's tactical genius and the versatility of his nanotechnology armor. Working with allies who were virtually strangers, he coordinated a nearly successful attempt to remove the Infinity Gauntlet from Thanos' hand. When that effort failed, Tony faced the Titan one-on-one in a desperate last stand. Despite deploying every weapon and innovation his armor contained, he succeeded only in drawing a single drop of blood from the cosmic warlord. The confrontation ended with a sword of Tony's own technology, impaling him through the abdomen, a wound that would have been fatal without Doctor Strange's intervention. "Spare his life," Strange offered, "and I will give you the Time Stone." This bargain seemed incomprehensible to Tony, especially after Strange had previously insisted he would let both Tony and Peter die rather than surrender the stone. The explanation would come only after Thanos departed with the Time Stone, as Tony treated his wound with nanites from his depleting armor. Tony, Strange said, his body beginning to disintegrate from what would later be known as the snap. There was no other. Of the 14,605 possible futures Strange had examined, only one led to victory, and it apparently required both surrendering the Time Stone and keeping Tony alive. The devastation of the snap became personally catastrophic for Tony, as he watched Peter Parker dissolve in his arms. "Mr. Stark, I don't feel so good," the teenager said, clinging desperately to his mentor. "I don't want to go." The loss of Peter, a young man Tony had recruited, mentored, and grown to care for deeply compounded the trauma of defeat. Of all the combatants on Titan, only Tony and Nebula remain. Their journey back to Earth aboard the Guardians' ship Benatar became a survival ordeal as they faced dwindling supplies and failing systems. Tony recorded what he believed would be his final message to Pepper, accepting death while drifting in space. His unexpected rescue came from Captain Marvel, who returned him to a drastically altered Earth and a fractured team of survivors. The reunion with the remaining Avengers was particularly tense between Tony and Steve, their Civil War wounds still fresh despite the global catastrophe. When plans were proposed to retrieve the Infinity Stones from Thanos and reverse the snap, Tony refused to participate, physically collapsing from exhaustion and malnourishment. "I got nothing for you, Cap," he said bitterly. "I've got no coordinates, no clues, no strategies, no options, zero. Nada." This refusal marked Tony's lowest point. The genius who always had an answer, who defined himself by solving impossible problems, had finally encountered failure too massive to overcome. When the remaining Avengers returned from their mission with news that Thanos had destroyed the stones, eliminating any hope of reversing the snap, Tony finally accepted the need to move forward with his life. The 5 years following the snap saw Tony undergo his most profound transformation yet. Retiring to a lakeside cabin, he married Pepper and became father to Morgan Stark, a daughter who represented everything he had to live for in this new reality. He disassembled the Iron Man armor, focused on sustainable energy projects, and avoided contact with the remaining Avengers, creating the peaceful family life that had always seemed impossible during his superhero career. This idyllic existence was interrupted when Scott Lang returned from the quantum realm with a theory about time travel that could potentially undo Thanos' actions. Tony initially rejected the proposal, unwilling to risk his hard-won happiness on what seemed like a desperate gamble. "I got my second chance right here," he told Steve, looking toward his home where Morgan waited. "I can't roll the dice on it." Yet that night, looking at a photograph of himself with Peter Parker, Tony couldn't escape the weight of responsibility he felt toward those who had been lost. Turning to his holographic workstation, he cracked the quantum physics problem that had stymied Bruce Banner, developing a working model for time travel that could access alternate timelines without changing their own past. This breakthrough represented Tony's true heroism, not the spectacular battles in armor, but his willingness to risk his perfect present for those who had lost everything. When he arrived at the Avengers compound with the completed time GPS devices, his reconciliation with Steve Rogers symbolized the healing of old wounds in service of a greater purpose. The time heist that followed drew on all of Tony's capabilities, his technological genius in creating the time GPS and developing a new quantum suit, his strategic thinking in identifying key moments when Infinity Stones could be acquired, and his improvisational brilliance when the initial plan went awry. His unexpected detour to 1970 with Steve provided a chance encounter with his father Howard, allowing Tony to see him not as the distant legend of his childhood, but as a nervous, expectant father, with his own insecurities. This meeting brought closure to one of Tony's oldest emotional wounds. Speaking to a father who didn't recognize him, he was able to express gratitude that had gone unspoken during Howard's life. The conversation gave Tony new perspective on his own fatherhood and Howard's love for him, which had always existed but been poorly communicated. The time heist succeeded in retrieving all 6 Infinity Stones, but at the cost of Natasha Romanoff's life, a sacrifice that sobered the team as they prepared to use the assembled stones. When Thanos from 2014 attacked the Avengers compound, destroying their quantum tunnel and threatening their timeline, the final battle for the universe began. Tony's participation in this conflict showcased both his technological evolution and personal growth. The Mark 85 armor represented the pinnacle of his design work, incorporating refinements to the nanotechnology with classic design elements that harkened back to his earlier suits. More significantly, Tony fought not just for survival or to correct past mistakes, but for the future represented by Morgan, Peter, and countless others who deserved their chance at life. The climactic moment came when Doctor Strange silently indicated to Tony that they had reached the one future out of 14,605 possibilities where they would prevail. Understanding immediately what had to be done, Tony managed to transfer the Infinity Stones from Thanos' gauntlet to his own armor in a desperate lunge. "I am inevitable," Thanos declared, snapping fingers that no longer held the stones. And Tony responded, the stones assembling on his gauntlet, "Am Iron Man." The snap that followed eliminated Thanos and his forces, saving the universe but at the cost of Tony's life. The power surge from using all 6 Infinity Stones caused devastating damage throughout the right side of his body. As he collapsed against debris from the battlefield, his friends gathered around him. Peter Parker, restored by the reversal of the original snap, tearfully thanked his mentor. Rhodey, his oldest friend, maintained a silent vigil, and Pepper, his wife and partner, assured him that they would be okay, giving him permission to rest. Tony Stark was not a perfect man, Steve Rogers eulogized. He could be arrogant and self-centered, but when the moment came to make the ultimate sacrifice, to lay down his life for others, he didn't hesitate. This assessment captured the essence of Tony's heroic journey, not the absence of flaws, but the willingness to overcome them when it mattered most. At Tony's lakeside home, those who had known and fought alongside him gathered to mourn. The original arc reactor that Pepper had framed years earlier, inscribed with proof that Tony Stark has a heart, was set adrift on the lake, symbolizing the fulfillment of that long-ago declaration. The brilliant light that had kept Tony alive through captivity, palladium poisoning, and countless battles had finally dimmed, but the legacy of Iron Man would continue to illuminate the world he had saved. To understand the full scope of Tony Stark's legacy, one must look beyond the technology and battles to the people whose lives he transformed. Perhaps most significant was his mentorship of Peter Parker, whom Tony identified during the Sokovia Accords conflict, and took under his wing. Recognizing Peter's incredible potential and fundamental decency, Tony designed increasingly advanced Spider-Man suits, integrating AI assistants and protocols meant to protect the young hero from the dangers Tony himself had faced too early. Their relationship evolved from distant benefactor to something approaching a father-son dynamic, with Tony gradually taking a more active role in guiding Peter's development as both a superhero and a young man. "I wanted you to be better than me," Tony told Peter during a difficult moment, expressing both his high expectations and his hope that Peter would avoid his mistakes. This mentorship relationship became one of Tony's most important legacies, as Peter Parker carried forward the lessons learned from Iron Man, while developing his own heroic identity. Beyond Peter, Tony's technological innovations transformed countless lives. The arc reactor technology, refined from Howard Stark's original concept, revolutionized clean energy production worldwide. The prosthetics division of Stark Industries, inspired by Tony's work helping Rhodes walk again after his injury, created affordable advanced limbs for wounded veterans and civilians alike. His developments in artificial intelligence, despite the Ultron catastrophe, laid groundwork for beneficial applications that would continue helping humanity long after his death. Perhaps Tony's most profound legacy was the paradigm shift he created in superhero identity. By publicly declaring, "I am Iron Man," Tony broke with tradition, rejecting the notion that heroes must operate in shadows. This transparency, while often creating complications, ultimately helped build public trust in enhanced individuals and established a framework for accountability that would influence heroes for generations to come. The Avengers themselves represented another crucial aspect of Tony's legacy. Though initially resistant to teamwork, Tony eventually became the team's backbone, providing headquarters, equipment, funding, and strategic vision. The relationships formed through the Avengers, particularly his complicated friendship with Steve Rogers, challenged Tony's individualistic tendencies and taught him the value of trust and collaboration. In his personal life, Tony's greatest achievement was undoubtedly his growth from self-centered playboy to devoted husband and father. His relationship with Pepper Potts evolved over more than a decade from professional partnership to deep romantic connection, with Pepper providing the emotional stability and perspective that Tony often lacked. Their daughter Morgan inherited Tony's intelligence and curiosity, ensuring his intellectual legacy would continue through a new generation, guided by Pepper's wisdom. The evolution of the Iron Man armor itself tells the story of Tony's journey, from the crude Mark I built in desperation, to the sleek nanotechnology of the Mark 80. Each iteration reflected not just technological advancement, but Tony's changing priorities and self-image. The early models emphasized overwhelming firepower, while later versions incorporated rescue capabilities, medical functions, and interstellar travel options, showing Tony's expanding vision of what a hero could be. In death as in life, Tony Stark defied conventional wisdom. The man once dismissed as a selfish dilettante sacrificed everything to save the universe. The Merchant of Death became its savior. The futurist who once believed technology could solve every problem ultimately won through an act of human courage and sacrifice. As his holographic farewell message concluded, "Part of the journey is the end." The legacy of Iron Man isn't found in the technology he created or even the battles he won. It lives in the world he saved and the people he inspired to protect it. From the cave in Afghanistan to the final battlefield against Thanos, Tony Stark's journey transformed him from a man in a suit of armor to something greater, a hero whose greatest innovation was himself.